From the land of conjurers flying through the internet to your device like a UAP, hauntingly unexplained and downright weird, this is the witching hours, and we are ready to take off in the flash of an eye. Good evening to one and all, wherever and whenever you are listening to this program. I am Johnny the Frost, and joining me, as always, is the medium Jenny Lee. How are you doing, Jenny?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Oh, doing okay, doing okay. Looking forward to this show tonight. We're going to have Rissa Miller joining us here in just a little while, and we're going to talk about all kinds of things, including divination, witchcraft, herbology, all kinds of, well, some things. We've talked about a lot of stuff on the show, but some of the stuff we get to talk about tonight is going to be new. So always looking forward to that.
Yes. She seems like she knows a lot about a lot of things, so I'm sure we'll have no shortage of things to talk about.
Yeah, we'll have the meeting of two history minds tonight, so we'll see. That ought to
Yeah.
be fun. That ought to be fun. Not like we haven't had other history people on here, but that's always enjoyable.
Yes.
Um, we're back at it this week. Just a heads up, programming note. Um, Going into next week, we're going to have um, John Koenig on, and he's someone who specializes in hypnotherapy, PhD, and he has written a couple books about past life regressions
Yay.
and his experiences with that as a hypnotherapist. So we're going to get into that next week. So
Exciting.
yeah, I think he's written two books about it. So and the experiences he's had. So that's going to be an interesting show next week. And the week after that, we're going to have Cheryl Costo on the 27th. So we get to
Ooh,
pick
having
back up.
Cheryl back on.
Yeah, get to pick back up with Cheryl again. So that's going to be fun. So lots coming up for you guys in the next few weeks as we push our way, believe it or not, through June. Here we're almost at the halfway point of June already.
Mm.
So we've been talking about finding our rhythm this summer. I
Mm-hmm.
think by the time we find our rhythm, it's the
Yeah,
summer's going to be over.
pretty much.
Yeah,
I
but
think that's
anyhow,
pretty much how it happens. Yeah.
yeah. So there we go. Welcome in, everybody. Nice to see so many of you in chat. Hello, Keisha. Um, hello, Not and Getty. Welcome in, CMC. I hope everyone is having a wonderful evening tonight. All right. Are we ready to jump into some news?
I think so.
All right. So we have one national headlines straight out of our area. The city of Norfolk repeals long-time enforced psychic reading ban.
Oh.
Uh, Norfolk psychics, start your readings. Norfolk City Council members repealed a decades-old
Mm.
unenforced ban on psychic readings Tuesday.
Unenforced ban.
Yep. The
Yeah.
7-1 vote repealed a section of the city code that forbid the practice of palmistry, palm reading, phrenology, or clairvoyance for money or other compensation in the city. Carol Peterson owns the Crystal Sunflower Store, which sells items like crystals and tarot decks, all that weird stuff that people do.
Yeah. Uh-huh. All those
Um,
weirdos.
Peterson says she was relieved to see the fortune-telling ban repealed. As a business owner, it makes me feel a little bit safer, Peterson said. Norfolk City Attorney Bernard Pishko, who placed the item on the agenda, said in a text message that the repeal effort was due to the elimination of a protection that is no longer needed. So essentially, from reading the article, it seemed like the code was put in about 1915. I guess towards the end of the spirituality movement there.
Yeah, spiritualist movement. Hmm.
And Norfolk County
I
included.
thought maybe they had put it in after the Pungo witch.
Oh no. Well, to be honest with you, if you go back to the Punko witch, none of that stuff would have
I
been
know.
relevant at that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Norfolk County, which at the time included a lot of other areas down there like Chesapeake, banned their practice in 1956, and violators could be fined up to $500 and have to spend 6 months in prison.
Wow.
The ban passed unanimously, despite objections from one lawyer. And this is kind of funny. The reason that the reason they are going against a lawyer is because it was actually Portsmouth, and all the psychic readers have businesses in Portsmouth, so they don't want Norfolk to have readings, so they won't lose their business. So the only people who are going against the ban now were people who were going to be lose their maybe lose some of their clients. China's Shang 6 mission, bringing back first samples from the far side of the moon. The spacecraft is making history as it prepares to head back to Earth, carrying the first lunar samples, 4.5 pounds of them, from the
Mm.
far side or the dark side of
The
the moon.
dark side of the moon.
The uncrewed craft is carrying bits of lunar rock and soil scraped from the Apollo Basin crater in the moon's south pole. It will begin making its way home on June 20th, and opening the orbital transfer window, the best time to return to Earth. There will be a parachute landing in the inner Mongolia set for June 25th. And if the recovery is successful, the samples will be the first from the moon's far side. And researchers hope the samples provide clues on why the two sides of the moon are so different.
Cool.
So some dark
I
side
guess
of
we
the moon samples.
can look for some stories about that in the next year as they start to study it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, going back to the last news story, I saw that Keisha was saying they need to have a committee to go back and look at old BS laws.
Just do them all at once. Just get them all over with.
I feel like sometimes those kinds of laws are kept on the books just so. I feel like they have like ulterior motives for them, because then if there's someone that they can't catch for a big law, they can kind of hit them on something else, and to get them in.
This drug dealer was gonna get off on
you just do a tarot reading,
but now we can get him on doing tarot readings. You get 6 months.
It's like Al Capone, right?
I guess so. Yeah.
Couldn't get him for. Got him on tax evasion, though. All right. And the last story for tonight: a radio signal from space repeats every hour, defying explanation. The universe is awash with strange radio signals, and there's been many times in the past where we've received weird radio signals from space, which have been, caused by natural occurrences. And now we've detected another really bizarre one that repeats every hour, cycling through 3 different states. And many of the scientists are saying its origin cannot be explained by our current understandings of physics. The signal first appeared in data gathered by ASCAP radio telescope in Australia, which watches a big swath of sky for distant transient pulses. Officially designated a long number, the signal seems to repeat every 53.8 minutes. Whatever it is, the signal cycles through different states. Sometimes it shoots out brilliant flashes that last between 10 and 50 seconds and have a linear polarization, meaning the radio waves all point in the same direction. Other times it pulses are much weaker with a circular polarization lasting just 370 milliseconds. So scientists are saying, of course, they don't think it's from any kind of extraterrestrial species, but possibly some kind of star or something that we don't quite understand yet. But I still think it's, whether it's a neutron star or something else, if they don't have an explanation for it, it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's right, Non-Getty. It says specifically it could be a neutron star or a white dwarf, possibly. So, but either way, it still doesn't fit what they're expecting to get
from an alien spaceship.
Or possibly, yeah. There's been a lot of stuff in the news about a lot of that stuff lately, especially the I'm drawing a blank on the Dyson spheres, where they think there's been like multiple things that they're wondering if we didn't find Dyson spheres at different stars, which a lot of people have said would be the first way we would know about extraterrestrial life, because we would see people harnessing the powers of their suns.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe I'll throw one of those in next week. But anyway, that was the news.
Yay.
All right. Okay, well, it looks like we're ready to rock and roll with our with our guest tonight. So
Yes.
let's go ahead and do this. Rissa Miller is an editor, author, herbalist, seer, and storyteller. Her storytelling expertise stems from extensive research into the area of esoteric history, including ghosts, witchcraft, cryptids, and folklore. Rissa believes the most enduring stories teach us not only about humanity's past, but also give reason to reflect on our own present beliefs and realities. She often leads ghost tours and gives lively history talks. Please welcome to the show, Rissa Miller. Welcome to the show, Rissa.
Thank you so much for having me.
And did we say your name right?
You did.
Oh, yay.
Rissa. Yeah, Rissa.
It's nice to meet you. I'm Jenny.
Hi, Jenny. It's lovely to meet you as well.
So excited to talk to you because we were just talking about this before you came in. The amount of topics we could talk to you about is just huge. Like,
Indeed.
We definitely can't fit it all into 2 hours, I don't think, but we're going to try.
We'll do our best. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of crossover tonight, and we're excited about it. We've talked about a lot of things on this show, but even just like personal, I don't know, just kind of topics that we're interested in. I've always been exceptionally interested in witchcraft and witches, and I'm also a history guy. I have my degrees in history, so I'm looking forward to talk to another history nerd, if I might say so, tonight.
I'm totally open to being called that. That sounds great.
Okay, excellent. That's great. Okay, all right. So I guess we should start where the easiest place is to start, which is, how did you get into this stuff? We're talking about witchcraft specifically, getting into herbology, divination. Was that all combined for you? And when did you start getting interested in that?
This has been part of my whole life. And gosh, so I'm a third generation diviner. Tarot cards were part of my family history. There is Roma in my background. And the tea leaf reading I taught myself. It was quite accidental, actually, how I started tea leaf reading. I was 15 or 16. And for the holidays, my mom gifted me loose tea. And I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. Loose tea was a very special thing. It was a different time. I mean, I'm 49 years old. So you couldn't just get loose tea in a small town in Pennsylvania. It was special.
Yeah.
And
going to be in a tea bag.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
wasn't like Lipton or Tetley tea.
Yeah.
And of course, it came with a metal tea ball, and that broke almost instantly. It was a total piece of crap. And
I think they still make them like that.
I've noticed they haven't improved them much in the past 30-something years. I don't understand why. I feel like there could be some engineering marvels with brewing tea, but I'm not sure what's going on with that. So that said, when the tea ball broke, the fancy loose tea scattered all over the inside of the cup. And as I drank, I was not going to waste it. It was too precious. And I also felt like very British and proper drinking out of a teacup, even though I'm not British in any way. But I was so excited to have it. And as I drank the tea down, I noticed there were little patterns forming the inside of the cup. And I said to my mom, "This looks like a cat." And she said, "Well, that's a kind of divination. What else do you see?" And over the years, I would continue to do that and keep notes. I started by drawing them. And that's actually kind of how I still do my readings today. I draw what I see. And so when I do a tea leaf reading, the person gets a pen and ink drawing of everything that was in the cup. That's cool. Of course, I don't have one handy right now because I'm not in my usual spot. But so that's how I fell into tea leaf reading. Tarot was part of the family. Doing herbs was part of the family. I'm the only one who ever actually did these things publicly, and for strangers in the public, and the only one who went to school to study clinical herbalism, because I kind of wanted the slip of paper that says I did time studying and learning science. Yeah. So I did all of that too. History, I can tell you the moment I fell in love with history. I always liked history. I was a nerdy kid. There's no two ways about it. I'm still kind of nerdy. But I absolutely fell in love with history because I had a teacher who taught that history is a perspective. and I will always remember him my whole life. I know, like when we studied World War II, each row at exam time had to write an essay about the World War II from the perspective of a country that was not America. So one row got France, one row got Japan. I remember the Japan row specifically because I was in it. But you had to look at the events that happened with a perspective. And that completely changed how I look at history. So now when I think about history, I literally always consider my perspective. And I consider, like, as I'm telling a story on a ghost tour or a history talk, what perspective am I giving? And sometimes I will even say, I am biased in this direction, but here is the story. So those are the moments when the things you asked about specifically became part of my life.
I love it when a teacher gets brought up, because me and Frosty are both teachers. Well, not really anymore. I was an art teacher and he's a history teacher. So
Yeah.
Those teachers, those good teachers.
Absolutely.
Yay.
Well, that kind of brings up an interesting thought here because, Ginny comes from a family with things that are in the background, but, I don't find very often, and we talk to a lot of people in different kinds of religions and practices and witchcraft and Wicca and you name it. We've probably had some run in with that on this show. But there hasn't been a lot of generational stuff being passed down, I guess, for obvious reasons. But that's so I feel like in some ways that's maybe a little bit more unique for you to actually have training from an early age or at least an idea of like, hey, you can check this out further. And what does this mean? And kind of encouragement. Do you think that, have you come across that yourself or?
I've definitely come across other generational diviners for sure. Generational witches, a few. And, mostly I run into people like that at conferences.
Mhm.
When you hit a big, tarot conference in Salem, Massachusetts, you're going to find other people. Not everywhere, though. So, yes, I would agree that there was a swath of time that would affect a lot of people in my age group called the Satanic Panic.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people who were generationally doing things like this pulled back because it didn't feel safe to do it, to teach it, or to talk about it. And I know because I lived through that time.
Yeah.
And it definitely sort of squashed some things. I remember being told you must never share with anyone that we have tarot cards. You must never share. Like, there were so many things you must never tell. You must try to blend in, even though you're different. You must never tell people you see ghosts. Like, all of these things, it was a hard rule. And it was because of the, what's the word? Social climate of the 80s.
Yeah. That was kind of the same thing for me too. It's like a lot of things were open in my family, but then it was always like, be careful who you tell that to.
Yeah.
Because people don't take it well. So yeah, I completely understand.
And not to be ridiculous, but in my family, we didn't have any generational divination or anything that was being passed through, or what would be considered like occult practices. But I faced the same thing playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes,
that's what my dad
did.
passed down to me. My dad taught me how to play Dungeons and Dragons, and we had to keep it a secret.
Which sounds ridiculous now, doesn't it?
Well, Dungeons and Dragons was being blamed for people's deaths in the 80s. So I get that. It was a thing that people were really worried that Satan was at the root of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, just trying to put it in perspective, if you're someone who didn't live through that time frame, that's kind of what I was getting at with that question is sometimes I think there's a lack of generational practice with this because there was a spot in history where you couldn't really be open about it. So
yeah, it wasn't safe. So
yeah, a lot of spots in history.
Yes,
this was the most recent one.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. I feel like we're in a kind of patchy place right now, and it could go either way. We'll see.
Yeah, it's really weird right now. Well, and this is something I was, one of the questions I was going to bring up. We've been asking to a lot of people that we have have one talking about these things specifically, which is, it is a very weird place. I don't get super political in the show, but I think we live in a time where it could kind of go either way.
I agree.
And we're seeing lots of, well, I say this all the time. I can go into mainstream stores now, your basic, chain stores, and go in and find like spiritual T-shirts.
And
So,
sage.
and sage and tarot cards
and planchette earrings and things
yes.
like that.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question I have for you is, are we entering a new era of spiritualism, or is it just kind of mainstream interest?
I would answer that yes and no. So here's why. I'm not trying to be ambivalent. So yes, because there are people in generations younger than mine who are kind of sick of the way things are. They are finding that, and I'm sure there are people in other generations as well, but it's very prominent in Gen Z and millennials especially. They have reached a spot, not all of them, but many of them, where they feel like a lot of society's, what's the word? Institutions have failed them, have failed to hold them up, have failed to support them, have failed to do the things that society's institutions are supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they are looking back to the older ways. They are looking back to things like foraging for herbs. They are looking back to things like tarot cards and other forms of divination. They are looking back to meditation. They are looking back to these much more ancient practices and finding more sense and peace and logic than they are finding in other systems. And this is a thing that has been reported on over and over. Really, even the New York Times has covered it. And the New York Times even actually said why younger people are turning to witchcraft. And it's because it feels like it's for anyone. They feel like they don't have to look a certain way or love a certain way or fit into a certain box to be embraced by a witchy community. It is easily shared online and in digital spaces. There are whole books about digital spellcraft out there. So it's a thing that even if, you work a full-time job and you have a side hustle, you can access it still online anytime without having to go to a particular meeting at a particular time or a particular day of the week. So in that capacity, we're seeing more. We're seeing a greater embrace of all things esoteric and occulty and spiritual as far as spiritualism goes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the flip side of that, I think there's a greater level of fear than we've seen in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost palpable sometimes. One of the ghost tours I was leading, a person got onto the Facebook event page. This is such a silly thing. They got onto the Facebook event page and said, nobody should go on this. The devil will be there. So I replied, I'm actually holding the ticket list. He didn't buy a ticket. If he doesn't have a ticket, he's not coming. Go. So
he's not allowed in.
Yeah, I think I wrote no ticket, no tour. So
good for you.
Well, it's also a fact. Let's be honest. But no ticket, no tour. But that said, I mean, it's mostly history. It's a haunted history tour. It's a lot of history. It's a lot of storytelling. It's a lot of folklore. And my response actually sold a lot of tickets. That night I sold out, and so did the next two, because people thought it was ridiculous. But the fact that somebody wrote it, the fact that somebody was afraid of what is essentially a nighttime history tour, I think it's very telling that, just like some people are embracing the unknown, others are becoming more afraid. It's another symptom of polarization. And I follow politics quietly, and I don't want to get into that at all. But I think that there is a growing pulling apart that I don't personally know how to fix. That's not my area of expertise. But I surely hope that someone comes along who does it, who can help, reunite people and make us realize we're all here sharing the same planet. We live on this big piece of rock together, and we get further when we work together.
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't take a catastrophe for that to happen.
Yeah, like a UFO.
Yeah.
I heard what you always saying before I came in the room. Yeah. I mean, and honestly, you know, fear is a powerful thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it is always troubling when superstitions and fears lead people's thoughts and actions.
Mm-hmm.
It's historically, we can look back and see that it was never productive. Like literally, it was never productive when people were led by fear and superstition. It
Absolutely.
always causes death, strife, problems, chaos. And yet, I don't understand why it's so difficult to learn that simple lesson and people fall back into it. I can't explain that to you. I don't know.
Well, we've definitely had our firsthand experience with that with this program. Usually once the interview is done, it's going to go straight onto YouTube, and then I will like create some highlights and stuff from the show to put out there for all the short attention span people out there on TikTok and things like that.
Course.
To try to draw them over and, and get something out of the show as well. And it's been, I don't want to overstate it, but I do get lots of religious quotes, like Bible quotes and stuff.
Right.
And that doesn't matter whether we're talking about witchcraft, whether we're talking about UFOs, whether we're talking about missing time, whether we're talking about fringe science. And so I would just say that it's kind of the same thing that you were talking about. Like the fear isn't based off of one thing. It's like the fear of anything paranormal, weird, or strange.
Yeah.
Which
it's the fear of other. And, you can just leave it right there because that covers not just the paranormal, but, racism, other religions, all of it. The fear of other is a very powerful motivator. And to me, if there's something that feels other to me, my inclination is to try to understand it, to learn more about it when that's possible. And, in most cases, though, it is possible, but you have to get curious. And you have to choose to learn and take the sting out of something that is scary. But it's a decision-making process that has to happen.
Yeah. And it's one that I had to make because all of a sudden one day I had to make the decision of how am I going to respond or not respond to this? You go from putting up videos and then all of a sudden, as you grow and get bigger, that's when you start reaching people that don't agree with you.
Yeah. It doesn't actually take all that long.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I guess the way I looked at it was, this show specifically is about having open conversations and getting out of your comfort zone and talking about things that you could agree with, you might not believe in, but just having those ideas put out there and to have a fun conversation about them. So I guess moving forward, I just kind of decided I wasn't going to remove the comments, like the people, that way the people can have their say in their part of the conversation. But I don't know how, going back to what you were saying, I wish there was a way to actually have a communication about it, but that's probably not what's going to happen in that situation. So I haven't found a way to engage yet, but it would be interesting to be able to have more of a dialogue about these things.
Well, and the other person has to be willing to enter a dialogue as well. Yeah. And that's not always the case. So like in the case with my ghost tour, the person who put up the comment and I responded in kind of a cheeky, sassy way, they never responded again.
Yeah.
But a lot of other people responded on the comment.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I don't think they realized they did me a huge favor, but they did. And, I was on another podcast a while ago and we were talking about the historic space that is Christmas monsters. So I'm sure you've heard of Krampus and the Marilud and all of the Christmas beasts, right?
Yeah.
And I do a presentation on that and I love the topic and I've gone on a lot of podcasts around the holidays to talk about them. And it's done in good fun and with a historical perspective. And I did mention on the show that a lot of the Christmas traditions are hijacked from Yule. Yep. And they are. This is a historic fact.
True.
This is like a documented historic fact.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of nasty commentary about it. They said that I hate Jesus and I was a bad person and not the podcasters, but random people. And what it did, in fact, was boost it until they had over 25,000 views on that one show.
It's So it's doing the complete opposite of what they would like it to do.
Yeah. And they were very wonderful and gracious people. They made sure they were like, oh, are you okay? Did you see these comments? And I was like, I'm fine. I was like, are you all fine?
Yeah.
You know, I was like, I know I didn't actually say what they're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, I said, and if somebody wants to practice Christianity, I'm here for it. That's for them. They're like, everybody should do what feels right to them. I never said otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And
Shield wall. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm good. I was like, in fact, I'm happy for you. I see your podcast is doing really well now.
Yeah, a little bit of turmoil. You know, what do they say? The best publicity. You know, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah, there's no such
thing as bad
Yeah,
publicity.
there we go.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, Rissa, I am. We might have to talk to you later on down the road again because maybe we can talk about some of those things as the weather gets cooler and we get around to the Yule season again. That'd be great. I actually wrote my master thesis on Christmas. So we could probably have some cool conversations.
You guys could have a whole Christmas conversation.
That would be so much fun. I would absolutely love to do that.
Yeah, that'd be fun. So maybe we can get us a Christmas show down the line, or Yule show, or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
All right, Jenny.
We actually do like Jesus podcast episode.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Oh goodness. I wanted to talk more about your tea leaf readings.
Sure.
So you told us how you got into it, and I was just snooping around on your website and saw your little video of like how you draw it. So what are some of the symbology that comes out for you? Like, do certain images mean certain things for you when you see them?
Absolutely. But if you're familiar with the idea of what a tarot reading looks like, there's 78 cards and they have specific meanings. And they're usually read in certain ways. I mean, not always, but usually. So it's not like that with tea leaf reading. Everything is fluid. It's a very intuitive process. So I have within my brain symbols and meanings, some that are my symbol sets, and others like from art history class or literature or studying folklore of Native Americans, whatever the case may be. I'm always, as I'm living my life, I'm always adding to my symbol set. And symbology is such a vast topic. I mean, you can literally get a PhD in it. When I try to explain to people how vast symbolism can be, I always bring up the Divination book. The character Robert Langdon, played by Tom Hanks in the movies, was a doctor of symbology. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's a huge subject and nobody knows them all. But to do tea leaf reading, you do need a basic language that you're going to use. And no two tea leaf readers do it the same. We just don't. I know a few others, and we all have a system that is our own. And it's interesting, like one time myself and another tea leaf reader read a cup. We came up with the same basic storyline, but we used symbols differently. So it was interesting. We arrived in the same place, but we took different roads. Yeah. So from that point of view, yes, I have certain symbols that do mean certain things to me. So a squirrel, for example, to me means save your nuts and seeds because tough times are coming. Now, other people will tell you a squirrel means it's time to be playful and jolly. And that's just not how I read that symbol. Yeah. And, in an interesting note, at the end of 2019, going into the beginning of 2020, before the world shut down during the pandemic, everybody had a squirrel in their cup. 100%
really?
of my clients.
Save your nuts, people.
Yes. 100% of my clients for those 3 months had a squirrel. And I thought that was weird. I absolutely did not predict the pandemic. But I was just like, something's going on. Like, what is this? Like, why
it's
is
like the universe is trying to give you a hint? Like,
yeah. Everybody got that note, basically. Like, I remember one lady going like, oh, I feel like I'm pretty well set financially. And I'm like, well, maybe this is a resources thing then. I'm like, do you have all your resources lined up? Because I mean, nuts and seeds are also resources. Yeah. And
did you have enough toilet paper to get through? Save your toilet paper.
You better stock up on toilet paper and canned beans because they're going to be out. Yeah.
That's what the squirrel was trying to tell everybody.
Absolutely. But I mean, that's one example. But then other symbols are so personal and unique to each person that no book or interpretation will ever help. One of my favorite examples of that, I was reading for a gentleman, and he came in asking about his family. He had aging parents. He was in conflict with his sister. And so I was looking at the cup, and I knew what I saw. And I was like, this can't be right. This has got to be wrong. Maybe I'm tired. I had a million reasons that I thought I must be wrong. It was an iguana holding a martini glass. And I was like, no, Rissa, trust yourself. Trust your intuition. Go forward. And I said,
gotta trust it.
Yeah. I said, so I have a lizard here. It looks like an iguana holding a martini. And he goes, well, that's my mother. That's mom. He goes, we call her the reptile, and she drinks martinis every night. I would have never predicted that in my conscious mind ever.
That's just like a medium reading, getting some weird thing that makes no sense, but you have to trust it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Another time I saw a big diamond ring with a burrito. I had no idea what that was about. It turned out my client had just been proposed to over a burrito dinner.
Wow.
I was just like, okay. I was like, you feel good about that, right? I was like, you're happy? And she said the burritos were her favorite meal, and he did it exactly right. And she was so delighted that it also showed up in the cup, the burrito and the diamond ring.
It was literally a ring over the burritos.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yep. But again, like these aren't universal symbols. These are things that are very specific to individuals. And there's no guide that's ever going to, figure that out for you. Oh
yeah. There's not going to be a book on the iguana holding a margarita. No.
No, that's not a thing. It's not a thing.
No.
So I think that when I'm doing a tea leaf reading and I finally look down at the drawing just to read the story, basically, what I'm looking for are these my symbols or are they theirs? Mm-hmm. I try first to apply my meaning to the symbols. And then if that doesn't make sense or it's not working or it's not a storyline, I'm like, okay. I was like, one time I had a woman come in asking me about her true love. And literally in her cup, there was nothing but cats. Nothing but cats. I had cats all over this cup. There was a giant cat face on the bottom. And I actually showed it to her because you could even see them. It was that prominent. And I was like, so are you thinking about getting a cat or something? Like that's all that's on your mind? You're telling me that you're looking for a partner, but all I'm seeing here is a cat. And so surely enough, she squealed and she goes, I was going to bring him. He is my true love. And I was just like, oh, wonderful. So the next time she had a tea reading from me, she indeed brought him in a cat carrier and I got to meet him.
Oh, that's awesome.
He was a fantastic gentleman and probably truly the love of her life, a quality man, if you will.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
But again, that's very unique. And
not everybody's going to have a partner that's the cat.
No, not everybody's true love is going to be a cat. No. And I mean, some people are allergic or scared of them. Mm-hmm. But, normally I would look at cats in my cup and read their body language to decide the temperament of the person's home. Like, does the cat look peaceful? Maybe their home is calm and peaceful and their family is doing well. If the cat looks like a spooky Halloween cat with an arched back, I'd be like, so there's some tension at home. So that's normally how I read cats, but I knew that wasn't the case.
Yeah, this was different. Wow.
Yeah, that was not what was going on in that woman's cup. So, the long answer to your question is that I do have a symbol language. I've developed it over many years. I add to it constantly, but sometimes it goes right out the window and it's completely intuitive.
That's awesome. So it sounds like when you do a reading, it's very much like preparing for it is very much like a tarot reading. Like somebody might have a specific question, mm-hmm. or you're looking at something about them personally, or you're looking at some future thing. Like it could pretty much be anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And it's often not what they're thinking it's going to be.
Yeah.
So a lot of the two most common questions I get, like any reader, are about relationships and money, jobs, career. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'd throw education in there with the money, jobs, career as well. Mm-hmm. And it's not always the answer that they get. Sometimes I always tell my the seekers who come to me, I'm like, I'll try to address your questions, but ultimately your guides are going to give you the message you need from me. It's not going to always be what you want. Tarot does that too, of course, but tea leaf reading can be so specific. And I also tell people everything is on the table. When you turn that teacup, suddenly everything is on the table. And I have also seen some very difficult things that I've seen abusive relationships. I've seen people who are being bullied at school or work. All of these things have come up in various different forms. People dealing with massive amounts of grief. And, as a reader, you have to be very ethical in how you approach situations like that.
Absolutely.
And if somebody doesn't want to talk about it, I don't push it.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I can see that. It can be difficult sometimes to, like, how much you want to pry into a reading,
Yeah.
You like if they're willing to be open about it, but sometimes it's hard to, like,
Absolutely.
yeah, for sure. I can see that being an issue. Well, that's interesting. So I have a question because I'm not picturing this correctly. So, like, when you're reading the teas, you're reading the tea leaves after the tea's been drank from the cup and the leaves are left
Correct.
over, right? So
Well, no, the leaves are in the bottom. So
yeah,
when you do
in the bottom of the cup.
right, or
Yeah.
hopefully all over the inside.
Okay.
So somebody will sit with me or at home, because I do them virtually as well, and they'll drink their teacup with loose tea in it. And I actually prefer people to use a tea bag now because I like the finer sift. It gives me more pictures to read. So when I would never argue with someone who said that full leaf tea tastes better, 100%. I'm here for it. Like, it does taste better. It's a better cup of tea, but I want a lot of information. So the finer a tea is, and in a tea bag, it's called cut and sift tea. Then the more I'm going to get for them. So I always ask people, get your favorite tea bag, cut that open, brew it according to direction. And then I have a video on my website about how to turn it if they're doing it remotely, or if they're with me, I demonstrate. Turning the teacup is the trickiest part because you don't want, you want the tea to coat the inside and not be like splattered all over your walls. And yes, that does happen. Unfortunately, that is a fact. That is real. So there is a process, and then you pull it off of the saucer, and it's usually all over the inside. And I think it's beautiful. Some people think it looks like a dirty teacup. But I think it's gorgeous because I look at it and see a story. I look at it and see all the pictures.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think some people have the ability to see the abstract and some don't.
And I do have an art background, so I'm sure that was a part of this. People ask me, like, how did you learn to do this? Like, it's basically a form of scrying. How did you learn scrying? And I always credit my father, because when I was a little girl, we used to first it was crayons, and it became colored pencils and markers over the years. We would scribble all over a page and then trade. And we would look for pictures in each other's chaos. And so that was how I learned to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't think he knew he was training me to scry, but he did. And we did that all the way through until I was a teenager. I still have a bunch of his old drawings. It's such a cool way to sort of refocus your mind and look at something differently. Something that looks like nothing or a mess initially always has something in it.
I always love these stories when it's like everything that we were just talking about this on the last episode, I think. Like, everything you've done your whole life has, like, led to what you do now.
Absolutely.
Like,
I didn't start here. I've arrived here, and I'm interested, over time. I'm excited to see where I go with it too.
Oh yeah.
And see, I was curious because I don't know how the tea went. I don't know if you drank the tea every time or if the client drinks it.
They always drink their own tea.
Okay.
The client. And I was going to ask if you could do it virtually. You answer that question.
Yep. During the pandemic, I had to figure out how to continue to work with my clients. And not everybody loves tarot readings. Tarot readings are very easy to do virtually. And so I literally figured out a system that worked for me. And it worked out to be a good system because I have one tool at my disposal virtually that I don't have in person. And that is the ability to zoom in on a computer screen and see teeny tiny details.
Yeah.
So I actually, I actually feel that I give a better virtual reading than I do an in-person reading. Because in person, I've got 20 minutes to finish my drawing before the person's time is up and I have to move on.
Yeah.
When I'm virtual, I can take as long on the drawing as I want, as long as my schedule will allow it. Sometimes I take an hour on their drawing, and there's way more there than if I was rushing through with just my magnifying glass. Sitting in a somebody's home or a restaurant or art gallery. So
that's pretty cool. CMC was saying something is absolutely screaming at me that Rissa needs to spend some time in Sedona. Have you ever been to Sedona?
I have not. It is definitely on my life to-do list. I would totally love to go.
Yeah.
It is literally in my top 10 dream trips. So
hopefully you get there one day.
Yeah.
Some weird stuff there.
That sounds perfect. I'm all in.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, one thing that came to mind when you were talking about reading the tea leaves was automatic writing. There seems to be possibly some crossover there. Has that been something that you've tried before?
I honestly don't use that tool. Not that I'm opposed to it in any way. I just never do. I rely heavily on my intuition just as myself, kind of like a medium would. And I use my gut basically as a gauge of things. And sometimes even when I'm reading for people, the things that come through are so clear. It's even like people's jobs or names or specific things like that. It comes into my mind. So I simply trust that.
Yeah.
As I trust myself as all I need, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. Yeah, very much like a medium reading. So I was also seeing that you do smoke readings, which that's not something I had ever heard before. So does that kind of work the same way, or what is the difference?
It does. It works. It's also scrying. So let's see. How do I say it? So it's a thing that I was taught by a medium, and she did it with candle smoke. The thing that makes it difficult with candle smoke is that smokeless wicks are becoming more and more common.
Oh, yeah.
So you actually have to find a really low quality candle.
You got to buy the crappy ones.
Yeah. You have to buy a really low quality candle in order to get a good amount of smoke from it. Doing smoke scrying outdoors, you have the influence of the wind. And that will change things. So I like to read smoke indoors where I don't have to worry about the wind or vent. I have definitely seen sparks blow and things like that. So I'm very particular about, I will practice this particular kind of divination. I used to be a little more flexible about it. And then I watched sparks fly off of something one time. I was like, yeah, no, we can't do this here anymore. But you can also use incense smoke, which is a little more controlled. And
Keisha was just asking that. Can you use incense rather than candle? Yeah,
you can. And it's actually, when I teach smoke scrying, it's the way I teach it. I teach it with incense. And again, I always encourage you, get good quality incense. Please don't buy it at the gas station. You are literally inhaling it into your body. And, I learned this the hard way by living with someone who's asthmatic. And if you don't buy good incense, anybody who has any kind of lung concerns, including your pets, will let you know that you did a bad thing.
Yeah.
But use good quality incense and just learn to, A, trust your intuition, and B, look for patterns in the smoke. Incense smoke can be so descriptive. It has actually put out letters, people's faces. There's a link on my website to an article that I submitted to Pathos, and it was published by a writer named Kobe Michael. And I give all the basic patterns that you can start with smokes, like ladders and things like that. When you're learning smoke scrying, there are a few basic patterns to know. And then after that, you're going to literally just look for the pictures. And with incense smoke, it is usually, their pictures are easy to see.
Yeah. If you've ever watched an incense smoking, it's so strange how it'll move through the air and it changes direction.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
I find that when I ask it questions, it answers in real time.
Oh, wow.
So definitely a thing.
What's the process for that? I saw that you're like reading the smoke as it's going up, but do you hold a piece of paper over it and then
the drawings?
Yeah.
Those are soot drawings, and yes, I do hold a piece of paper over it to create the soot drawings. So I love giving people something from their reading because I'm also an artist, and that is just part of my process. And yes, I capture soot on the pages, and then I seal it with art fixative, and I read the soot. So that's another way to do smoke scrying. That's kind of a twist on the traditional way. I mean, smoke scrying goes back historically, like oracles of Delphi use smoke. And I think people were probably practicing smoke scrying as a form of pyromancy from the time people had fire.
Yeah.
I think it's a very ancient form of divination. And it's one that it's actually, like I said, if you have incense, it's a great way to learn. And it's one that will answer you very quickly.
Now I want to try it.
You should definitely try it. You should definitely try it.
I just bought a whole bunch of new incense. So light them up.
Perfect. The other tip is to make sure it's backlit. So if you put it in a spot where the lighting is wrong, you won't be able to see it. Mm-hmm. It has to have something dark behind it and then light shining through it towards you.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, the technical things, but yeah.
Yeah. You gotta be able to see it well.
Mm-hmm. And then I use my symbol language. I just apply the same symbol language to that. If I scry in water, I use the same symbol language. I always tell folks who are interested in one form of scrying or another, you learn one symbol language, you apply it to all scrying.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody's is different. Like you were mentioning that earlier. Yeah. I think that's important for people to remember is that it's what does it mean to you? And then if it doesn't mean anything to you, what does it mean to the person you're reading?
Right.
For? Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Precisely. Frosty, did you have any more questions about that? Because I would like to move on to something a little different.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
And now for something completely different. So I saw that you also do, and I liked it so much because I wrote it down twice. I just realized that. You do lectures and things on cryptids.
I do.
What is your favorite cryptid?
Oh, it's Chupacabra.
The Chupacabra.
A Chupacabra. I've never seen a Chupacabra. I'm not going to pretend like I have. In fact, I've had a lot of ghost experiences, but I've never had a cryptid experience, at least not yet. And I've certainly looked. They just haven't chosen me. But and that's okay. If they don't want to choose me, they don't have to. Mm-hmm. But I love. Chupa's a very modern cryptid, as I'm sure you know. Chupa's not been with us that long, but I like the alien version of Chupacabra. Oh. I like because the other one kind of just looks like a sickly dog. Yeah. It's just sort of sad.
A mangy dog, yeah.
Yeah, or like a sick coyote or fox. And I mean, that goes into other cryptids like the coyote and things like that. But the original cryptid, the Chupacabra, the one that has like all the political affiliations in Puerto Rico and things like that. I was like, I love this. I love the story. I love how Chupa seems to migrate everywhere. He's on the move. He's a busy cryptid.
Yeah.
And I have always had a great fondness for it. I've even found police reports in like teeny tiny little counties in Pennsylvania of Chupacabra.
Wow.
So, yeah, right?
Made it all the way to Pennsylvania at this point.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Chupa's a very busy cryptid.
Yeah. I remember there being lots of Chupacabra sightings in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And you don't hear as much about it. I don't hear as much about Chupacabra now as I did then.
No, well, Chupa's been made cute by Netflix too. Okay. Have either of you seen the after this whoopie pies? Absolutely, who isn't? But I'm after a whoopie pie myself. That sounds fabulous. But Netflix put out a movie called Chupa, and it is absolutely adorable. It is how evil scientists are trying to track down a chupacabra to study it, and there's a baby chupacabra.
Oh.
And of course, the baby chupacabra is befriended by a sweet young boy, and Chupa saves him from a wild cat, and it's actually a charming movie. If you get a chance to watch it, do it. It's entertaining. Like I said, but with that, Chupa suddenly became sweet and friendly and adorable, and you want to snuggle him. So
yeah, and I think in the late 90s, when I was hearing a lot of the reports, it was is it a vampire or animal?
Yes. Well, I've always been partial to vampires, so I do like the vampiric aspects of Chupacabra. I mean, I grew up in the years of the Lost Boys, so I mean, is it the vampires are my favorite? I mean, are they cryptid or are they a monster? I don't know. There's that gray area between cryptids and monsters, but I do also love a vampire story.
So the cryptid was the chupacabra was just for you then.
Oh, perfect for me.
Vampiric things, yes.
Yeah.
So you said you had lots of ghost experiences.
I have had many in my life. Yes.
Tell us an interesting one.
Okay. Interesting. In what way?
I was going to say, I think all ghost stories are somewhat interesting.
Yeah, I think
give us a topic here.
I think they're all interesting personally. How about one that I had with the public?
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
So, Jenny, as you mentioned, I do a lot of talks and lectures in my historian role. And I was giving a talk in the B&O Railroad Station in Ellicott City, Maryland, about Edgar Allan Poe. And he has actually personally walked through that railroad station. So there was relevance. And, it should have been a pretty cut and dry kind of thing. But there is a ghost there named Charlie. And I did not mention Charlie as I started the talk. And I'm going on and on. Who knows what I was saying. And two women who weren't together, didn't know each other, both stood up and screamed at the same moment.
What?
They were sitting in two seats, like one was in front and one was behind. Same edge row. They swore they had icy cold hands come and touch their shoulders, both of them, as if somebody walked up to the side of the crowd and put their hands on two people like this.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, my bad. That was Charlie. Charlie was not acknowledged when I started this talk, and that's completely my fault. So I stopped and told the story of Charlie. Unfortunately, those two women did not stick around to hear it. They definitely left. They were not interested in Edgar Allan Poe enough to stay and have Charlie touch them again. And then other people were like, oh, I wish Charlie had touched me, but it doesn't work that way, as you know. Yeah. When you're talking about any kind of supernatural experience, you can't choose it. It has to choose you. And Charlie did not appear again that night. But Charlie is a regular in Ellicott City, Maryland. I actually went into his museum today, but I didn't actually witness him at all. He seems to be pretty peaceful today. But
Does he have his own museum?
Well, it's a railroad museum. And he had, during the time of the Civil War, which was a really relevant time for this particular rail station, because it connected the Union Army to the West and to Washington, D.C., he was the conductor at that time. He lived there, and it was his place, basically. He was a big character in that part of the country's Civil War history. But Charlie is one of our most famous ghosts in Ellicott City, and I do always go in and talk to him when I'm walking by the museum just to say hello, since he obviously wants his due.
Yeah. Yeah. Sound like
Charlie demands his attention. Yeah.
It always seems like ghost experiences happen when at the time where you least expect it. I've never had one happen where it's like, oh, something's going to happen. It's always like, did that just happen? Like, that caught me by surprise. Can you do it again? Like, I wasn't ready for it.
Right.
It always seems to have that aspect to it.
And it's never the person who wants it. It's always the person who doesn't want it. Yeah.
Usually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I have people who want to have them on my ghost tours so badly, and they'll be like, do you feel a cold spot? I'm like, you're standing next to an open window in November. I'm sure you're cold. You know, it's like, yeah, that's not a ghost, honey.
But they want it so bad.
They do want it so bad. And, you know, it's always people, like I said, who aren't expecting it or aren't desperate for it, that it seems to happen for. Whether it's photos or like the touch on the arm, or that we have in Ellicott City, we have a hair puller. We have a ghost that pulls hair. So it's so random. You can't anticipate it.
Speaking of Edgar Allan Poe, just as a weird side note, I go to well, there's a lot I could say, but let's just say that my yoga studio is just across the street from where Edgar Allan Poe had his honeymoon.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, with Virginia?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they still have a sign up there. It's very faded and dirty, but it's the portrait of them hanging up outside of it. And now I think it's like a hairdresser and a gift shop. But
well, at least they're remembered. So I'm a big fan of Poe. I used to be a literary coordinator at the Edgar Allan Poe Museum in Baltimore. Oh, and cool. I think it's cool, any little touch of Poe history you've got there.
Yeah.
You know, Poe who gave us the detective story, Poe who gave us the definition of a short story. Brilliant mind.
And we have the Poe Museum, and we're in Virginia, and we have the Poe Museum in Richmond.
That's a really good one. That's way bigger than the one in Baltimore. And that one has a cat, doesn't it?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I think that one has a shop cat.
We had Haunts of Richmond on it's been about a month ago now, maybe. I'll lose track of time.
A couple months, maybe.
But they used to do events, like haunted events there that they no longer do. So I guess the museum kind of turned away from doing them, but they had some pretty interesting things happening at the Poe Museum. So,
well, here in Maryland is where Poe died, so we claim him too.
Yeah.
It's a
he gets
battle.
split between the two for sure.
I think New York claims him as well.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know about that, but Maryland's okay.
Yeah, it's not that far away.
He actually died here. In some ways, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've never had a ghost experience with Poe, so we can drop that one right there. Full stop. I know a lot of people who claim to have, but I personally never have. However, I will say I've had a lot of other interesting. My first ghost experience was when I was a kid, and it was in England. So, kind of, I think I had an understanding of what ghosts were before that, because there were things that I would see and experience, and my parents never taught me to be afraid. They didn't teach me to be scared of ghosts. They just said, no, they're here too. Give them their space and move on. You know? And so I wasn't told no. I wasn't told it's wrong. I was just told they're also here. You know, they're spirits that are also here. Yeah. And I think my parents didn't even explain to me that they were dead. I think it was explained to me that they were in like a different dimension or something like that my brain couldn't even comprehend as a child. But it just also taught me to be like, okay, you know. So when we were visiting England, we were in a town called York, and it's a super spooky place. War of the Roses, I'm sure you've heard of, you know, all of York and Lancaster and War of the Roses, the red rose, the white rose. We took a ghost tour. It was my first ghost tour. I was 8 years old. And we went into a restaurant after that was not part of the ghost tour. And I walked upstairs to use the bathroom, and I saw the full spectral form of a teenage boy from the medieval time. And he looked so sad. I felt so drained. I felt so sad around him. And I was like, I guess he needs help. So I went downstairs to get my mom. I wasn't alarmed. I was just like, this boy needs help. And I brought her upstairs, and we couldn't see him. He was just gone. And she said that the room seemed funny, like something felt off. So we found someone who worked there, and she's like, oh, you saw Marmaduke. Marmaduke Buckle was a young man who had lived in the house in like hundreds of years prior. And because he was different, today we would say he was probably a person with special needs. He was accused of witchcraft and sorcery. He was accused of all kinds of horrible things and was shunned by his town and hanged himself in their room.
Oh my goodness.
And
wow.
manager we spoke to was relieved that I didn't see him hanging, because apparently some people see that. And as a little girl, I just saw him standing there being very, very sad. I did not see him hanging, which is probably for the best.
Yeah, really.
As a child. Yeah. Yeah, that's not how he appeared to me.
That's also kind of like some intelligence to the haunt as well, of like knowing what to kind of show.
What to show. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, that's a sad story, but he has a badass name.
Yeah.
Duke Buckle. That is a hell of a name. Well, I hope his spirit has found some kind of peace.
Yes.
After having a terrible life.
I agree with you. It was an incredibly sad story. And, you know, it's interesting too, because I mean, as a ghost tour guide, I know a lot of ghost stories, and some of them are incredibly sad, and some of them are just kind of there and choose not to leave, kind of thing. Yeah. It's always interesting to see the dynamic. I mean, there are ghosts. I do ghost tours in both Pennsylvania and Maryland, and there are ghosts that are playful. There are ghosts that seem to be having fun.
Yes.
Well, that was one thing I was getting ready to say too earlier. Like when you said that you hadn't had any sightings of Edgar Allan Poe there, you know, the interesting thing about that is they haven't at the one in Richmond either.
No.
You know, the ghost sightings they have there are other people who own the property throughout the years. Which I just being kind, you know, I wouldn't consider myself a skeptic by any means, considering I co-host this podcast. But the skeptic I do have in me says, I think that's more believable, right?
Yeah.
Like that you're not seeing Edgar Allan Poe at all the museums, that you're seeing other people who lived in those areas from different points.
Well, you know, where Edgar Allan Poe died in Baltimore, it was at a hospital at the time, but it's now an apartment building. And he wasn't the only one who died there. I mean, it was a time when
a hospital, a place where a lot of people die.
And I always wonder about that apartment complex. And I mean, it's very like, you know, chic and modern now. But I always think to myself, I don't know that I'd want to live there.
No.
Nothing to do with Poe. But I don't know I want to live where there was a Victorian hospital.
Yes. Yikes.
It seems like there might be a place with a lot of unrest.
You would think. Yes. Frosty, we can't get too far into this conversation without you being able to talk to her about some witchcraft and some witches.
Yeah, and I'm not sure which way I want to start with this. I guess we can go kind of with the historical route first, because that's the way to kind of dive into it. I guess I think most people listening to this podcast, especially from the American point of view, are probably familiar with Salem.
Of course.
But I know
people in the world are familiar.
Yeah, most people. Yeah, we know Salem. We have Hocus Pocus, and so we know about that,
which is completely historically accurate.
Exactly.
Same sisters, you know.
Absolutely. Cheers to the
you know, but I did some research when I was younger, not even expecting to find anything, and I found out about the Pongo Witch here in Virginia. So what are some other witchcraft stories that you know from history that we might not be so familiar with?
How much time do we have left?
We still got an hour, so we're good.
Okay. So there are a lot of ways to go with that. There are so many cases of witchcraft historically because the definition of witchcraft is fluid. And the definition of witchcraft we use now was basically defined during the witch trials and witch hunts in Europe. It is a person who is practicing some kind of non-Christian dark arts, probably. But it's not the definition of witchcraft that is wasn't always a thing. I mean, it used to just be nature-based religion, which is what all faiths were before religion became more organized.
Like a shamanism.
Exactly. Like any native faith, like any historic pagan faith. Things were more about the seasons and the cycles of the planets and moons and about how the earth changed, you know, every year. So that's a broader definition of witchcraft. And I think it is probably a good place to start for that question, because there are so many practices and versions and ways of looking at witchcraft that to lock it down into the dark arts answer just doesn't really make sense. Unless you want to talk specifically about witch trials. But, and which Maryland did, in fact, execute a witch. Just one. But Pennsylvania never did. Pennsylvania was founded by Quakers. And I think that's a great story to start with. Let's go there. So Quakers weren't the first people in Pennsylvania, but they were the people who actually got, the deed from, England. And so William Penn came along and founded Penn's Woods, Pennsylvania. And Quakers were not well liked in England either. King James was really good at, how do I say this, killing lots of people. And he didn't like anybody who wasn't just like him or didn't agree with him or support his cause. So Quakers were in that group as well. Just like James liked to kill witches, he also liked to kill and torture Quakers. And so when the Quakers came here, it was really firm in their mind that they didn't want that kind of atmosphere for their colony. They didn't want a repeat of what had happened in England.
Yeah.
So a woman named Margaret Matson is accused of witchcraft. She came as an indentured servant, worked hard, did well, earned her freedom, married, worked hard, did well, bought land. Her husband dies. She becomes a widow. Suddenly there are problems. She has land that's on water. It was in a place called Ridley Creek in Pennsylvania. It's near Philadelphia. You can actually go there. Ridley Creek is now a state park in Pennsylvania. Beautiful, by the way. And so she's accused of witchcraft. Several of her neighbors come forward. Remember, she doesn't remarry. Wink, wink. And she's accused of using herbs for healing. Everybody used herbs for healing. There was no pharmacy. So that I always love that argument because I was like, when do you think bear aspirin was invented? It was white willow wood. Come on. So poor Margaret's put on trial. She's a Swedish immigrant. She speaks very little English. So this part is folklore. I mean, maybe, probably. William Penn says, "Do you fly through the night on a broomstick?" And she reportedly said, "Yes." And he responds in this story, "Well, there's no law against it." So the Quakers hear the whole case. She's judged by 12 Quaker men. And they come back with that she has the reputation of a witch, but she's not guilty of being a witch. Now, she's been accused of all kinds of things, including killing chickens and cows with her witchcraft. Not like just killing them outright, but using magic. And also appearing like an apparition in a woman's room holding a knife. So she can actually turn herself into a ghost and travel into other people's homes holding a knife. So they are like, no, we don't think those things happen. And we think the livestock just got sick and died. But all of that said, they did make her pay a fine for having the common fame of a witch. Now, remember, she has land with water. In that time, that was a really big deal.
The widowarchy, yeah.
Yeah. She's able to pay the fine, which I calculated in our modern money is about $80,000.
Holy moly.
Wow.
But she was able to pay it because her farm did well and she had water. So she had less trouble with her livestock and crops than anybody else.
Wow.
So I do love that story because it kind of set the tone for a very long time in how Pennsylvania handled witches. It's not that way anymore. I heard you all talking about people getting prosecuted for using tarot cards. Pennsylvania has that law as well. 1861, they put a law on the books in PA. Did you already say this?
No.
No.
We were talking about tarot.
No, this was just specifically Norfolk, Virginia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Pennsylvania has the law as well, and it makes all forms of divination for money illegal. It also makes treasure maps illegal and love spells. So
very specific.
Treasure maps are a big problem in Pennsylvania. So
well, the love spells I could actually maybe get behind, but
yeah, it's a little unethical, it's a little questionable.
Yeah.
But all of that said, it was just last fall they brought the terror charges up against someone in Pennsylvania, in Hanover, Pennsylvania, and April of last year, they actually went after somebody in another part of Pennsylvania, Lebanon County, Pennsylvania, and she ended up paying $500 in fines for tarot readings. So they are still enforcing it in different places. In 2014, somebody paid almost $20,000 in fines for illegal fortune telling.
Wow.
So Pennsylvania is still using and enforcing that. And I always think to myself, like, I don't know specifically all the details of these cases. I do know the most recent one that happened in Hanover because I personally know that woman. And she's a super lady. She's a great member of the community. She does all kinds of charities, stuff. She tries to provide a safe place for people, anybody who wants to come in. And it was definitely something that she considers to be part of her faith practice, that she does readings. And she fought it. She fought hard. So kudos to her for, you know, getting a lawyer and going hard at it. It is one of her goals to try and get it taken off the records because she feels, as many people do, that the law is outdated.
Absolutely. From it was actually something or another.
Well, there was actually a part to that story I didn't get to today where a person had fought this back in the 80s from the article that I was reading before. And they found out essentially what they could do is get some kind of paper saying they were ordained. And then the city couldn't do anything about it because then it was considered to be like a
spiritual
practice. Yeah.
And that is the case in New York State as well. That is part of their law too. That you can only legally do divination in New York State if you are ordained.
Weird.
In Salem, you have to have a permit. Believe it or not. Yeah. I actually know people in Salem, and you have to have a permit to practice divination there.
Very strange.
Shocking, I know.
Yeah.
Which city?
Yeah.
Well, it is. We had a metaphysical.
Well, I guess
shop.
the other option is, you know, not as good. So.
Yeah, I mean, we had a metaphysical shop not too far away from where we are, and to help try to bring in business, they wanted to bring in some tarot readers just to do like free readings at the shop to kind of bring people into the door, and they were shut down by the local police with really no laws on the books. They just kind of said that they weren't allowed and caused a scene and broke up kind of what was going on there. So there's definitely still a stigma against it. So.
Well, and you know, just this year a movie came out called Tarot, and in it, of course, the cards come to life and kill you. So, my favorite part of that movie was when the woman is reading tarot, her hair like blows seductively, and it looks amazing. And I'm like, why does that never happen to me?
So you've seen it? You've seen it?
Of course, I saw it.
Okay,
I wouldn't.
I haven't seen it yet. I want to see it, and when I say I want to see it, Jenny rolls her eyes at me. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Well, I mean, I'm a tarot reader myself, so I kind of want to have all that information in my back pocket if somebody brings it up. So I want to see things. Yeah.
Well, you know, and I'm also a firm believer. Like, I'm here to find the truth. That's one of the reasons I got into history, is because I want to know what's happened in the past. But you know, there's also room for a good story.
Absolutely.
You know,
history's full of good stories.
Yeah, and you know, the best ghost story doesn't have to be a true ghost story. So, you know, I'm fine with it as long as we know up front that I'm not being, you know, you're not trying to deceive. I think I'm okay with it.
Right.
So let us know in the comments if anybody else has been to go check out tarot yet, and then prepare for your next reading.
Yeah, hopefully not with that particular deck. It was beautiful though. It was a hand painted deck in the movie, and I was just like, I'm surprised they're not selling these in the lobby. But
yeah,
there you go. Their marketing people were really falling down the job.
It's always that way with like the witch boards and the Ouija boards too. They always find these really antique like boards that are all handmade. That it's not your Milton and Bradley.
Or one you drew on a piece of notebook paper.
Right. Yeah, that's not the thing. No.
Well, that actually brings us in here to another question we ask quite a bit. Do you use Ouija boards? Have you used them? Is there a problem with using them? Are they okay to use?
So, you know, kind of like you, I have a little bit of skepticism in me, always. So Part of my history background is Ouija boards, so you hit a good one. I do a talk called Grave Obsessions that's about Victorian spiritualism, and because I'm in Maryland, the Ouija board is a big part of that because it was patented and produced here until the 1970s. So I am not superstitious about Ouija boards. I think if you want to find something bad, you don't need a single tool. All you need is your intention. If you want to find something bad, you certainly could use a Ouija board. You could use a tarot deck. You could just use your voice. But if you are out there calling into the void, asking for something bad to come forward, you're going to get an answer at some point. And it doesn't matter what tool you use to get it. And that's my firm belief on that. Now, what is my opinion of the actual Ouija board? I like to say it is the most feared piece of cardboard in America. I don't personally get it. I've seen The Exorcist. The board isn't even in the movie that long. And until 1973, when The Exorcist came out, it was not a feared thing. Every household had them. It was more common to own a Ouija board historically than it was to own a copy of the game Monopoly.
Wow.
And so, historically speaking, during the Victorian era, you're looking at the Civil War. Lots of people are dying. We don't have dog tags yet. So not everybody can afford to go to a medium in that point in time. Now, during this time, of course, mediums hit their heyday, but they're for the rich. And a lot of people have lost husbands, sons, fathers, brothers, grandpas, uncles, whatever. And they want to know what happened. The Ouija board comes out. It's patented by Elijah Bond, and it's being produced in Baltimore. Within 1 year, they go from 1 factory to 3.
Wow.
So many people are desperate for a message, anything from the other side to know, is my person or persons, are they alive? Are they dead? Where are they? And a Ouija board could answer that. There's another bit of brilliant marketing with the Ouija board. We're going back to the Victorian time. Remember how courting is done? You can't touch each other's. You can't get near you can't get near a person of the other gender. But the Ouija board shows a man and a woman using it together with the board sitting on the lady's lap and both hands touching the planchette. It's a little shocking, but it becomes super popular and every young man buys one. So this is the true history of Ouija. And they were called witch boards before they were called Ouija. And they were named by a medium who was related to Elijah Bond. She said that's what it wanted to be called. Now, the interesting thing is when she asked the board, what does that mean? It said, good luck. Now, what's lost to history is the tone. Was it good luck or was it, good luck?
Yeah.
We don't know. And that is lost to time. But I can tell you the man who took over the Kennard Novelty Company, which was the name the board was patented under, basically like the fourth owner, was a man named William Fuld. And during the Depression, he was a millionaire.
Wow.
So the Ouija board was not a feared tool. It was a household item. Everybody had one. When you are dealing with war, when you are dealing with sicknesses, when you're dealing with lack of medicine, lack of money, uncertainty, it doesn't matter what time period you're in. People are going to look for answers somewhere. And the Ouija board was that answer for America for almost 100 years until The Exorcist came along. Since then, the Ouija board is being burned right alongside copies of Harry Potter or whatever, because suddenly people are really scared of it. To me, it is just a tool. And if you want to do evil or you want to seek evil, you don't need a tool. You can use anything. That was a long answer to your question.
Yeah. No, we've had that conversation
I have
a few times.
The right mug for tonight then.
Excellent.
It's been one of those questions I like to ask guests that are talking about this topic because we always get a variety of answers. And I think I kind of feel the way that you feel. Like if someone is doing any kind of divination, they're usually going to use some kind of protection. They're going to do the things that they need to do. So if you pull out the Ouija board and you're just like, and like I always say, like the first thing people typically do is go, does anybody want to speak with us tonight? And like you're putting the will out there for like anything and everything to come through the board, which, when
I sit down to do divination, I call on my spirit guides and ancestors first.
Exactly.
And, if you don't do that, or if you whatever your system is, if you aren't calling for a specific entity, being, name, you get what you get.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting too that you brought up the historical aspect of the Ouija board being popular and then not, because I remember specifically, and my memory is fading from those days. So Jenny might be able to correct me, but I think a Ouija board was brought over to my house, possibly from Jenny or one of my friends.
No, I think you had it at your house.
Well, it got brought there somehow. It got
Jenny,
brought.
it definitely wasn't his. You brought it.
Yeah,
somebody brought it.
Your mom did it with us.
I know, and that's what I was getting ready to say. Is I remember my mom saying, who would have been a girl in the 50s and 60s, saying, "Oh, I had one of these when I was a kid."
Yeah, it was a game.
Yeah.
It was literally marketed and sold as a game. And like I said, who didn't like it was mediums, because it was way easier to buy a Ouija board and do it DIY than it was
the business away.
Yeah, than it was to hire a medium and hold a seance in your home.
Yeah.
Yeah, Keisha, I don't know. It just showed up in my closet one day. And we were
that's what happened. A demon brought it.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Maybe Chupacabra brought it.
Or after Satan went on the ghost tour,
right? Yeah, he likes to drop those off afterwards.
Oh, well, and that's really interesting because that going back into the witches, you were talking about the property and the widow. That always seems to be the case, right? Like with most witches, they're widows, and they usually have some kind of property that other people are jealous that they have. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, they own a business, or they're somehow successful, or they don't want to remarry. The woman who died in Maryland didn't want to remarry, and it was the man who was courting her who led the charge against her to have her killed. So yeah, this is history, unfortunately. That and healers. A lot of times healers who didn't succeed were called witches, or women who didn't want to marry the first time. There's a lot of that too. Unfortunately, when you're getting into witch history, you're getting into women's history, and some of it is pretty ugly.
Yes,
there are definitely men who died as witches, and animals. I mean, thousands of cats in Europe were killed as witches. This is part of why the Black Plague spread so rapidly, because the Catholic Church had been killing off cats for decades. But it's kind of sad, and you'd think we would learn. But and in Salem, of course, you probably know they hanged 2 dogs as witches.
Poor doggies.
Yeah.
But superstition, like I said, fear is a powerful motivator.
Absolutely.
So I mentioned the Pongo Witch earlier. Had you heard of that one before as well?
I have heard of the Pongo Witch, but I don't know the story. I would love to know it.
I'll just to give you a quick rundown, and to say, if you ever come to Virginia, if you go to Williamsburg, you can go to the House of Burgess there in Williamsburg, and they do they essentially do like a play, an historical recreation. And so you buy your ticket and you go there. And if you happen to be like one of the first 20 people in line, you actually get to be one of the members who's up on the stage with the actors. Like,
that's fun.
And they take the actual historical record from the trial that they have, and they reenact the trial exactly the way it's done from the historical record. And I went there with one of my friends. And on the way down, we're just to have a fun night out, doing history nerd stuff. And and as we're going down, they were like, "Oh, they do the trial, and at the end, the people who are there, everyone is a part of the jury. In that point in time in history, everyone who would have been at the courthouse would have had a vote." And I'm like, "Well, we're talking about it's 2019. I think at the time COVID hadn't happened yet." And I was like, "There's no way we'll find." Wouldn't it be funny if we found them guilty, And sure enough, I'm going through the whole thing. I'm like, there's no way. And then at the very last thing that the woman had to do at the end of the trial, the woman who's being accused of being a witch, they won't allow spectral evidence. They're like one of the only colonies who wouldn't allow spectral evidence. So people couldn't say they saw her in the dreams or anything like that, which happened at Salem. But they do. The lieutenant governor who's running the trial does allow them at the end for her to have to say the Lord's Prayer. And when she begins to recite the Lord's Prayer at the end of the trial, she passes out and faints onto the ground. And so historically, she was found guilty of being a witch. And then that night in 2019, by a large majority, we found her guilty of being a witch, because it was just so dramatic.
Was she corseted?
Well, what they think historically happened, that this is what I was told, speaking to the historians that were there afterwards, is that she was just so distraught and had so much anxiety that, she just fainted because of, whatever.
And yeah, of course. That's why I also said, was she wearing a corset? Because you can't pull a full breath and it makes anxiety worse.
Yeah. And I would imagine, because that was, 1700s for that trial.
If she was anybody worth anybody, she had a corset on. And having had them on myself, I can tell you, I can see how you could become lightheaded very quickly, because you can't pull a whole breath in like that. And any little thing would be enough. I mean, think of all the times you see people, joking about smelling salts with women. It's because they couldn't breathe properly.
Yeah.
So I think there was probably a technical and scientific reason that she could have easily fainted.
So she doesn't get put to death. She does get found guilty of being a witch, but she ends up living a full life, and she ends up dying at an old age down near Virginia Beach in a region they call Pongo. But she was found guilty.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's an interesting one down. Today it's called Virginia Beach, but back then it was called Princess Anne County.
Okay.
So that's an interesting one to look into.
And there's still a road down there called Witch Duck Road. Yeah.
Which I never, I lived around my whole life and I just thought it was a funny name. And then it was historically, where the locals took her before she went on trial in Williamsburg.
See if she'd float or not.
Yeah. Who are you who are so wise in the ways of science?
Oh man, we've done some weird stuff as people, haven't we?
So true. I always like when they the stories about how they would weigh the woman against the weight of a Bible.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so we've kind of gone through and ridiculed the idea that, of women being attached to true witchcraft, but are there any cases where we do have women who are practicing what we would call witchcraft? Like and that's a curious part. I guess you kind of brought it up earlier. If you were a good healer, maybe you weren't considered a witch, but if you did some healing that didn't work, then maybe you were a witch. Is that kind of the way that worked out?
In some cases, absolutely. But the thing is, herbal medicine is just like any other medicine. The thing that works for me might not work for you because we live in different bodies. So, if I drink a cup of chamomile tea and I indeed have a great night's sleep, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And then you might have been like, oh, well, Rissa gave me this tea and I didn't go to sleep. She's clearly a witch. And it could be really just that simple. Or even worse, if somebody died, if they were being taken to a healer because they were sick. I mean, we didn't have antibiotics for a very long time in history.
Yeah.
And we didn't understand how disease was passed. So there are some pretty potent plants out there when it comes to killing bacteria and viruses. But again, it took us science to understand that. So, like garlic has antiviral action, but you might not have known that then. You might have just thought it was, for your vampire problems. But that said, so many parts of the witch as healer, it persists even today. I know that when it comes to even clinical herbalism, it still has this folkloric part attached to it, even though so much of it has become science. And so many plants are part of the pharmacopoeia. Like I said earlier, aspirin is originally made from white willow bark. So preparation H originally came from witch hazel. So it's kind of like all of these things have roots in nature, and yet we're so far removed from nature as a species that we don't know that anymore.
Absolutely. That was something that we were talking about at the very beginning that I thought was interesting that I didn't get to bring up. You were talking about how like the younger generations are kind of going back to that and like reconnecting with the earth and reconnecting with nature. And because of that, they're reconnecting with spiritual things. But then the other side of that you were talking about was that that is also happening because of the internet and because of all of this digital stuff. And it's like, man, like the juxtaposition of those things,
it's
right?
interesting, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Like we're able to connect to the earth more, but it's also happening because of technology. It's
because of these.
Yeah. So weird.
But there's a point at which when does information become accessible? So much of this information was always passed down by oral tradition. And if you didn't have a family passing it down to you, where did it come from?
Yeah.
You couldn't easily pop into, there was no Amazon. And before that, we had Borders and Barnes and Noble. And before that, there were these little indie bookstores. They definitely weren't going to carry like Spellcraft 100 kind of book. It just wasn't a thing that was done. And for all of that to be kind of in a safe space, this provides it a great home.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember many a night going to whatever bookstore or whatever in the 90s, and that was like the hollowed area where there was information that you could
New
get
Age
that
and
was
occult.
Yes, the New Age section. Yeah.
And
it was astrology
before,
and everything else shoved in there together.
Yeah, and I mean, and that was the one-stop shop. I mean, there was no Amazon, there was no internet to go on message boards or so I guess the access to information is beneficial for that just as much as it is anything else.
Of course.
Which brings up another little snippet of an article that I was looking at for the news this week, which was 10% of Generation Z, or the Zoomers or whatever they're being referred to as now, the people who are in high school and just graduated and stuff now. There was a study done, and 10% of them are looking for ways to get, like, they want to move towards what they're calling dumb phones. So there's like brands of phones that are coming out that aren't like, they're just like, I can text and I can call people, but like I can't watch YouTube, I can't watch TikTok on it. And they're like 10% are shifting towards those, so much so that some of the major phone manufacturers are having to like monitor this because they've realized that they're too hooked into technology.
Interesting.
And so that came to mind earlier when you were talking about there being a resurgence in this idea of like herbology and younger people who are getting into more spiritualist kinds of states of mind, that those things kind of wouldn't be connected, of realizing like, hey, I need to step back from this a little bit, which I think is actually fascinating because we don't attribute that very much, I don't think.
No, well, it's very easy for when you're older to kind of like roll your eyes and not give credit to young people for the things they're doing, the things they're doing right, especially. And I know that I certainly felt that way when I was young. And I'm in Generation X, and we're kind of like the invisible generation. But
yeah, I'm right at the tail end of Gen X.
Yeah,
I'm right on the.
And but we felt invisible in the beginning too. So. That's as far as getting away from phones, I mean, a lot of these people you're talking about would have gone to school learning on an iPad and reading digital books. We grew up with paper books. We grew up when we remember what a typewriter is. So.
Yeah. I remember, I can distinctly remember, I think I've talked about this before, when they brought someone into my classroom in the 4th grade to show us how to use a mouse. Because they were starting to be used all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, here's how you use the mouse. And we're like, oh, cool.
I think I was in 8th grade, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting, but it's interesting. And I guess there's, look, I'm the first one to try to ridicule technology because I do so much of what I do using technology, but it is good to know, I guess, that there's a little bit of at least a struggle of like, hey, like let's cut this back a little bit. Like, let's make sure we're balancing this somehow.
No, I think a balance in all things is something to aspire to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so to stay on the witch topic here.
Yes.
So how and how do we go from Europe's idea of a witch and the Salem witch and the witch story you told and the Pongo witch? How then do we get what happens with what we would call a witch today? What's the difference? Are those two things related? What's similar? What's different?
I think that's going to come down to an individual. So, all right, this is my opinion, just my opinion. This is not fact. So when you are looking at the historic witch definitions, especially when you're talking about things like Salem, you are looking through a lens of someone who believes in the Christian pantheon and concept of the devil. Now, the devil is pretty much in this explanation a Christian construct. And this is not a judgment. This is just simply an observation. To say that someone was a witch in Salem or in many parts of Europe through hundreds of years says that they were aligned with the devil and they were intended to do evil. Now, my understanding of witchcraft is nothing to do with Christianity. It is nothing to do with the devil or angels. It is everything to do with being aligned with the earth and the planet and the movement of the stars and outer space as nature understands it. They are not related. These are two concepts that are totally different. Mm-hmm. And it was a historic version of the church that imposed that veil on witchcraft. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't witches that don't do work with dark entities or the devil. I'm sure there are. There are Christian witches that literally identify in that way. This I can tell you for sure. There are many other witches that don't align with either of those things, and that's not part of their practice at all. It's nothing to do with what they do and nothing to do with what they believe. So from that point of view, if you are coming into this idea that it is a faith practice that is not about a heaven or hell or about the figure of a devil, you're looking instead at a fully different way of thinking. How do we get there? We release the structure of that construct. We just let it go. And then leaves us with what is here, what we actually see and feel and understand to be real in our world. Nature, seasons, stars, the moon. These are all things that we actually experience firsthand. Now, I have yet, and Jenny, maybe you're about to prove me wrong, I have yet to meet the medium who believes that hell is real.
I think people have experienced hell, but it's usually their own making.
I have yet to meet the witch that tells me that they are only out to do bad. That person would probably be what would you say, sociopath? It wouldn't matter what their faith practice was.
And usually people that are wanting to do bad don't tell you they're doing bad.
No, they don't.
They're not going to announce it.
Yeah, they don't usually come right out and then say that.
And I have talked to some who openly follow what they consider to be a left-handed path, but there's
I do too.
Still,
but
but there's still like it's not just want to do dark or anything. It's just
the people that are doing bad in someone else's viewpoint, to them is not what they're doing isn't bad.
It's about perspective. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of people out there I would say are doing lots of evil and doing like horrible racist, sexist, terrifying things, and they don't need the word witchcraft to put on top of it. They're just doing it. Yeah. So how do we get to people re-embracing that? Because like I said earlier, a lot of people feel that the in-place structures within our community have not offered them peace, have not offered them solutions, have not offered them acceptance. This is a big one. And to be able to find peace within themselves and acceptance within a community, they just kept looking. And they arrived at a place where perhaps they found an online group, or they found a book, or they found an audible book that said, hey, this is another way. Or they had a tarot reading and they were like, this is interesting. Let me learn more. And it just led them down a different path, a different direction. Yeah. And I mean, that's not my story, but I've met a lot of people that is their story. I mean, there are people I know who were raised Baptist or Catholic or any number of other faith systems. And they were like, I understand this worked for my family, but it doesn't work for me and I don't fit into it because of whatever reason. Some of them, it's because they were gay. Some of them, it's because they just had a terrible experience where they just never were a believer. And you can work with a god or goddess if you're a witch, or you don't have to. You don't need that at all. The system of what a nature-based witch could be is completely open-ended. So I think that's why some people, many younger people and other people of varying ages, I actually know a wonderful woman who embraced witchcraft in her 70s because she was so over her church system and she was so over not believing and showing up every week and pretending to believe. And then she read a book that she actually picked up at a metaphysical bookstore, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And she was like, this is what I should have been doing all along. And she said, I mean, when I was talking to her, she's finally peaceful in who she is and what she believes. It finally makes sense to her. It all goes together in a way that it never did her entire life. So I think it's about, for many people, finding the thing that actually resonates with their soul.
Yeah.
Despite the stigma hang on that word by society.
Interesting choice of words that you just used there.
It is.
Hanged on society. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like everybody's and that's, I don't know. I don't want to go off on some big tangent about religion versus spirituality, but it's
and
like,
again, it's like everybody has to find their own way.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting ready to say. Like everybody's journey should be individual. Yeah. It's like what calls to you? What leads you down that path? What's the thing that starts you seeking your own truths?
Exactly.
You know? Yeah. Yes.
And there's definitely some intent, I think, to take, to like the word witch itself. The fact that that's used.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and I guess a way to take power back over a word that, I guess to a certain degree, is apparent there. But, well, just to let everybody know, we're starting to wind down. We got about 10 minutes left in the stream. So if you have any questions for Rissa, please let us know and we'll get to your questions the best we can through here. Did you have any other questions real quick while we wait for these to roll in, Jenny, or did you have any already from chat?
Well, they're having a heated debate about hell right now.
Yeah. So
I didn't mean to start that for you. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
It's good to talk about. Like people need to share their different thoughts and opinions because that's how we learn.
Yeah.
That's how we learn from each other is when we talk about it. So the fact that they're having these, like they're writing a novel in the chat right now, it's okay.
Well, and there are other faith systems that have versions of hell. And, historically speaking, hell became prominent in what would be our society through medieval Christianity.
Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of Dante's Inferno. And I was thinking of all of the paintings that came out through that time period, depicting what hell looks like.
Yeah,
this is part of what informed our version of hell.
Yeah, because the term hell itself comes from the Scandinavians who were not Christian. In the biblical text, they have Oh, I'm trying to remember the word, the Hebrew word for the place where there was like a pit, like a trash pit outside the town, Sheol. Sheol's mentioned in there, but literally Sheol is talking about the pit of fire, but they're talking about the pit of
And they
fire
burn trash.
outside of town where they burn
Yeah.
trash. So hell isn't even prominently mentioned in the Bible. So there's lots of historical evidence that hell is a modern concept. That being said, I mean, I'm not here to change anyone's belief or
Yeah.
faith
Absolutely not.
because and there's other, but we can debate about it and me say this is what I believe, but you're free to believe what you believe here in our chat here. So no, I'm not attacking anyone. I hope nobody takes it that way.
Yeah.
But there's
Same.
always questions about faith, and that's part of faith inherently. When you talk about faith, what does that word faith mean? It
Mhm.
means you have to believe, and you have a belief in something that can't be completely physically proven.
Right.
And so, and to a certain degree, all of us are acting on some kind of faith. So,
And I think that the main discussion they're having is one of the viewers, Kay, was saying, well, what about somebody who does really terrible things? Like, what happens to them when they die? Like, do they not get some kind of punishment for their
Well, some people
deeds?
would say they get karma. That's
Yeah.
another whole faith system, though.
Yes.
and I can say, being witness to a lot of Jenny's readings, there can be a lot of guilt.
Yes.
There can be
People
a lot
put
of guilt.
themselves in their own hell.
Yes,
They
they
realize that
definitely
they
can.
did terrible things, and then they have to deal with it when they get to the other side anyway. But it's not
Mhm.
usually from some higher power. It's from within.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a guest who had a near-death experience who spent a lot of time in a hell that she created from her story.
Yeah.
Keisha was talking about that
Mm-hmm.
there. We did have some other questions, though. Here's a question asked from Ecuadorian Jersey. What? So they want to know if soulmates and if soulmates exist and what twin flames mean. Do we have any answers for this question? We haven't really talked about that in this show.
I guess, what do they mean to you?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Soulmates or
I mean,
twin flames?
same thing. I can only answer that in terms of what I think.
Yeah, just
Mhm.
answer like what you think about it.
So my quick answer to that is your soulmate is a counterpoint, not necessarily a romantic counterpoint. Soulmates come in many shapes and sizes. They can be a family member, a great friend, a colleague, an animal, but somebody who joins you on your path as a counterpoint to your own soul. Now, I'm not as familiar with twin flame. I don't think it's something I've ever experienced from what I've been told about the concept. So I can only regurgitate what other people have said.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that it is someone who you were reunited with again in a life to learn together. So that's really all I can say about that, because
Okay.
like I said, it's not my area of expertise, and it's nothing that I don't think I've experienced a twin flame.
Yeah, twin flames have become a really big topic. We get twin flame questions quite a bit. It's something that comes up a lot, and something that, well, just like we were talking about before when we talked about chupacabra, things in this world tend to get really, really popular and then not so popular. And I feel like twin flames is one of those words that is just really, people are really attracted to right now, which isn't to say that it's not there, but it's definitely a hot topic.
It definitely is, yeah. And I think the word soulmate is always loaded.
Mm-hmm.
When I say someone is your counterpoint, I don't mean that like they should be your everything, because everybody needs multiple people in their life to make it complete. So
yeah. To me, a soulmate is more like a soul family, and they can come and go, and they might be in your life for a little time, and for a long time, but it to me, it always seems like it's somebody that you end up meeting again and again because you're connected somehow.
Soul circle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A lot of different words for the same thing. Yeah. Did you see some other questions in there, Frosty?
I'm going through there. A lot of them are already been answered by our wonderful people in chat, because some people came in, they wanted to know about the smoke readings. So we've gotten that in there.
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of the other questions had been answered already.
Yeah. And I saw that CMC's just waiting for his hair to blow in the wind when he's doing this. Me too. Me
Yeah,
too.
you too.
Yeah, it has never happened, and I've been looking at tarot cards a long time.
Yeah. He's going to have to get a fan.
Yeah.
Keisha said we need fans and
We need
good
fans.
light. Yeah.
Fans and good lighting always help. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, we've pretty much hit the bottom of the hour. I will say, Rissa, I feel like we're just getting into the conversation tonight. There's so many more things I wanted to talk to you about, and the 2 hours always goes so quick.
We were talking about maybe having her come back for Christmas time.
I would love to, and it sounds like that would be a lot of fun with that being one of your areas of expertise.
Yeah,
Yes.
that would be excellent. I would think we would have a blast there. So we'll take you up on that. Hang in there with us because we're going to hang in here with you till we're done with the stream so we can say bye. We're going to do our false finish now for all the people who are listening on the podcast in another time, in another place. Thank you for listening to the show. If you can, feel free to leave a review, thumbs up, subscribe, whatever it is, wherever you're listening. Help more people listening to these wonderful conversations that we're putting out there. And thank you for listening again. We will see you next week. So until next time. And for everyone else who's still hanging out with us on YouTube or on Twitch, our wonderful team Weird, thank you guys for hanging out tonight. Thank you for all the wonderful conversations and chat. We appreciate all of you. Let's see who we're going to go.
A ton of people streaming tonight.
Raid.
Black Sheep Meat, Mystic Village, Some Ginger Girl, Weird Paul, Kids Chaos, Maxi Coon, Roxalotl, Shiver of Sharky, Diabolic Tutor, and Glitched Gamer TV, who used to be, what was his name? Shoot, I forgot. He changed his name from one thing to the other. It's a lot of people to pick from.
Do we have anybody in there that we haven't really raided before? We raid Sheepy a lot. We could raid Sheepy.
Yeah.
We raided Diabolic Tutor not that long ago. Who else do we have?
And we raided Mystic Village not that long ago. We raided Weird Paul not that long ago.
Yeah.
I feel like you raided Kids Chaos not that long ago.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing tarot right now. So,
nobody in tarot, huh?
No. I don't know if we want to see if there's somebody new to raid in tarot. I don't know if that takes too long or if somebody else has a suggestion. Let's see. Who's in tarot? Tell me about your day. Oh, no. Disco Cosmic. Tarot Lady in a Church. Emil's Divine TV Tarot. There's a guy that just dressed up like the dude. Yeah, he dressed up like Johnny Depp from Pirates of the Caribbean.
There we go. We'll go ahead and raid. Let's go ahead and raid. Let's raid Weird Paul.
Okay.
Weird Paul. I've been watching a bunch of his stuff lately. He's been putting out some good stuff.
He's fun.
Yeah. The original YouTuber from the 1980s.
Yes, making videos about McDonald's in 1985 or whatever.
Yeah. All right, I think we got it there. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you all. Many of you will see tomorrow. If not, we'll see you next week. Take care. Have a wonderful night.
Good night.